Last week, funeral prayers were held for Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist killed in the kingdom's Istanbul consulate. But questions about his killers remain unanswered, and that kept the case in the headlines. Our guest today was a close friend and colleague of Khashoggi. We're going to talk about media coverage of the story, how it's influenced public opinion, and the repercussions of the killing. I'm Ahmed Aliolu, and I'm speaking with the former director of the Al Jazeera network and the director of the Sharq Forum, Wadah Khanfar, one-on-one.
He became much more humble and started speaking nicely about Turkey when he realized Turkey owns the tape and owns the full story.
We've been covering the story or the killing of Jamal Khashoggi for more than 7 weeks now. But still the story is not fading away. It still makes headlines and it's still on front pages. Why do you think it struck such a chord?
First, the brutality of the crime itself. This is number one. Second, it has been a culmination of a situation in Saudi Arabia and in the Arab world, where the world has kept silence for long on atrocities, authoritarian regimes, the murder of the Arab Spring and so on, which has in a way or another culminated into this particular crime. So basically what has happened is basically a manifestation of rotten policies that the world actually implemented in our region and has yielded this kind of situation. The third, in my opinion, also, it has become an issue of journalism in the world. A lot of journalists across the world felt connected to this case. In particular, there are a lot of killings happening in the world, but this has been so arrogant, so vicious and criminal to an extent that every journalist felt personal about it. And the last element as well is American domestic politics. The Americans, in a way or another, in their relationship with Trump and his administration, the relationship with Trump administration with the Saudi regime, especially the Crown Prince, has led to a lot of anger and frustration. So it became also a domestic political issue in the United States of America.
But it's not because he's a well-known journalist and a contributor to the Washington Post. You said that there are lots of other journalists who've been killed on camera and they did not take this kind of coverage. Why in particular this kind of things? Because the others will tell you that there is something to MBS, to Mohammed bin Salman, to the Crown Prince. It seems that there's somebody who wants him to leave his position.
There are a lot of people who would like Mohammed bin Salman to leave, no doubt about this. Now, the most important thing about Jamal Khashoggi's story is not because it is utilized only by those who hate Mohammed bin Salman previously, but even people who were willing to go along with the fake story that Mohammed bin Salman promoted about himself regarding the fact that he is, or the claim that he is a reformer. A lot of international media promoted that story up to the killing of Jamal Khashoggi. A lot of international magazines and websites and TV stations start introducing Mohammed bin Salman as the new reform face of the kingdom. But they were turning away from other major complications that he's doing. One of them is the war in Yemen, the other one, the way that he's behaving with Qatar, the way that he did behave with the Prime Minister of Lebanon, with Canada, and many other things. The issue of Jamal Khashoggi, in a way or another, he stood naked in front of the world. This is the true, the most brutal, dark ages kind of operation, which is shocking even to those who were defending Mohammed bin Salman or willing to defend Mohammed bin Salman.
But why did Jamal deserve such a killing? They could have killed him in a different place in a way that nobody would know who was the murderer. Why did they choose this, say, the Saudi consulate in Turkey to perpetrate such a crime, do you think?
This tells you to what extent the current Saudi regime is in a way careless in the way that he's handling politics and international relations. And also it has to do with Turkey. In my opinion, Mohammed bin Salman wanted this crime to happen in Turkey because in a way or another he could have implicated the image of Turkey in it by saying Istanbul is not safe and this journalist has been killed. Of course, he did not expect that the crime will be exposed as it did because of a tape that was recorded. So he would have said he was killed in the streets of Istanbul. Istanbul is not safe. So the Arabs
think that Mohammed bin Salman wants to pick up a fight with Istanbul?
I think he wanted to make Turkey look ugly as far as security is concerned. And yes, he would like to pick up a fight, of course, with Turkey.
But on record, he said in the Davos in the desert, he said that we, as far as Erdogan is there in Turkey, King Salman is in Saudi Arabia, and MBS is the crown prince, there's nobody can disturb this relation between the two.
Of course, he would say so. But he said so after he realized that the Turks have evidences of the crime, how it happened. In my opinion, at the beginning, Mohammed bin Salman, when he made the interview with Bloomberg, he was full of arrogance, full of denial, full of, feeling free to say whatever and to do whatever he wants. That attitude changed. He became much more humble and started speaking nicely about Turkey when he realized Turkey owns the tape and owns the full story.
But doesn't this support the narrative of rock killers that he didn't know? Those hit squad, what we believe the killers of Jamal Khashoggi, step or overstep the boundaries of the mandate to bring Jamal back peacefully, as he asked them to do so.
It is actually the most silly narrative that anyone could imagine. If you say that this narrative could happen anywhere, I would say it will never happen in Saudi Arabia. Given the authoritarian nature of the Saudi regime, given that the crown prince is the actual ruler who interferes in every major matter and small matter in Saudi Arabia, given the fact that this operation was in a way or another a joint operation between many institutions in the state, if Mohammed bin Salman was not aware of it, it would have been never done. This is, of course, no doubt that he did it, and I think now international society is convinced. I do believe that the CIA have the evidence about it. I think that the narrative is not yet fully exposed, but I'm sure that when it is fully exposed, everyone will realize. But you can never exempt him from the responsibility. Even if, let us assume for the sake of argument, not anything else, even if he is right in what he's saying, isn't he the head of this political institution? If this crime has happened anywhere in the world, isn't the prime minister or the president of the state or the head of the institution the executive branch of the state?
But they're telling you they're cleaning their own houses. Now there is an ongoing investigation. Adil Jubair, the foreign minister, said that it's still ongoing and nobody is entitled to interfere in this until all the investigation is done. So why don't you give them room to do the investigation?
Because we cannot trust them to do so. Because this needs a monitoring from outside the corrupt system. If they are cleaning this dirty house, the person who should clean the dirty house is someone who is not the one who made the dirt itself. All these people who he mentioned or they mentioned in the list are connected to him in a way or another. He appointed Saud al-Qahtani, he appointed Al-Asiri, he appointed all these guys. They were some of his guards. So if he is the one who created this dirt inside the house, would you trust him to clean the dirt and to find out exactly who was behind this mess?
Okay, we know that Jamal Khashoggi was one of the insiders. He worked for the establishment, the Saudi royal family, for a long time. And he wasn't that kind of vocal in terms of criticism. But he was, when it comes to Mohammed bin Salman, he said on record that he's suffering from a kind of schizophrenia, in a sense that he put himself forward as a reformer, and at the same time he wants to rule the same as his predecessors did in the 1970s. Do you think that this argument or criticism sealed his fate?
I do believe that it is a culmination of things, not only one. In a way or another, America, for the Saudis or Saudi regime, is the most important strategic relationship Saudi Arabia has with anyone in the world. From the 30s until now, The only consistent and perpetual relationship that Saudi Arabia has is with the Americans. They cannot afford to have someone living in Washington, speaking English, writing in the Washington Post, talking in think tanks, in a language which is not a language of an opposition, but a language of a journalist who knows what he is talking about and who knows the regime.
How do you evaluate the way Turkey handled the issue, this kind of drip tactic? They didn't reveal. They do have lots of recordings in hand. They've given it to the intelligence community, the United States, Canada, EU, all these communities. They know. Why didn't they make it public? So to finish this story and to put an end, whatever you have in hand, just put it to the public and the story will be end.
Turkey has conducted a masterpiece of investigation. One of the most brilliant ways of handling such an international crime. In my opinion, Turkey from the first day succeeded in separating the political part of the crime from the judicial and investigative part of the crime. And they did not allow the narrative to be a quarrel between two states, Turkey and Saudi Arabia. It has become a crime that we are investigating to find out the truth about it. And second, Turkey was able to engage the international society in such a crime. Maybe some countries in the world, including the American administration, would have loved to see a fight between the Saudis and the Turks on the issue, and they will look silent and look at it and say, you know what, two rivals regionally fighting against each other and using an excuse of a crime. But the fact that Turkey did not put itself in a direct confrontation with the Saudis from the first day and allow the international society to know the details of the crime and give them the responsibility to bear with the Turks, that led to one of the most important movements. In my opinion, what happened to Jamal Khashoggi never happened to anyone else killed. This is something that is now taking place for 1.5 months and is still generating headlines and news. It is unheard of in media. In my opinion, this is normally any story that survives 1 week, 2 weeks, then after that it fades away and people then after archive it as a historical story. But now it's still generating news. And I think the Turkish institution, government, and the Turkish politicians have been able to master this in one of the most beautiful ways that I have ever read or known.
Now, with the geopolitical conditions here in the region, you know that Saudi Arabia is indispensable ally for Turkey, the same as the United States. Are deals possible in this case?
The Americans are willing to do so. I mean the Americans, the American administration, which is Donald Trump. From the beginning, they thought of it as a deal. This is why they dealt the way that they dealt with it, covering up Mohammed bin Salman crime in order to gain more benefits out of the relationship, praising and even, magnifying the relationship in a way which was not accurate by saying there are $500 billion or $450 billion are coming to the economy, which we know that it did not happen that way. I think the Americans, yes, they would love to make a deal and benefit out of this crisis with the Saudi Arabians. Turkey cannot afford to do so.
Why?
Because it has to do with the Turkish status and sovereignty and location in the Islamic world and the world. Turkey gained by having the moral high ground and the professional investigation more than they would have gained if they have made a deal by getting some few $1 billion investment or whatever from the Americans. Turkey now is respected as a serious regional partner, independent and systematically solid in its approach. No one can take Turkey lightly after now.
Okay.
Turkey is becoming a serious player.
What about the United States status? How do you evaluate Trump? The CIA recently said that Mohammed bin Salman, MBS, is involved. Today, APS was reporting about this, and they say there's no doubt, it's a kind of blindingly obvious that MBS, the leadership, was involved in the killing. So the United States status is also solid and strong, it seems. Why do you question Donald Trump's status?
The institutions in the United States not only know the truth about Jamal and the Mohammed bin Salman responsibility, but also they know that he should be punished for many reasons. One of them is Jamal Khashoggi.
Do you think he will be?
And others. Now Trump it's a matter of Trump right now. It is a Trump versus the CIA, Trump versus a lot of Congress, Democrats and Republicans, Trump versus the foreign policy of Saudi Arabia, of America as we have known it. Trump is trying to defend Mohammed bin Salman because of his business deals with Mohammed bin Salman.
But he has business deals with the state, with Saudi Arabia, not with MBS. So if MBS leaves, there are lots of others.
Who knows? I mean, okay, you are saying that the Americans have interest in deals that the Saudis are investing in arms deals and many other things, which are continuous. That could happen with Mohammed bin Salman or with whoever comes after Mohammed bin Salman. It has been happening with any king before Mohammed bin Salman as well. We know that. But I do believe that Trump relationship with Mohammed bin Salman is much more personal than the general relationship between the two states. And this is why he is too keen to defend him. And I think media in America today and yesterday, they are full of reports about why, okay, if you would like to have economic relationship with Saudi Arabia, that could be done by Mohammed Salman and by anyone could survive. Because the Americans are in the DNA of the military of Saudi Arabia, in the DNA of the infrastructure in Saudi Arabia, and anyone will rule Saudi Arabia will get the Americans to do the business deal with them.
How do you evaluate the international media coverage? Are you happy with the way they're dealing with being a man who's been the director of an international media outlets? Are you happy, or you feel it's a kind of more biased? It does have a kind of paradigms, stereotypes against bin Salman, against Saudi Arabia, or you think they're objectively covering it?
I think this is one of the most bright moments in the history of journalism in the world. A moment when journalists across the board, right and left, in many dimensions, in many countries, in wherever you go, stood together in order to defend a value, to insist on knowing what happened, and to insist on punishing the criminal. That is a turning point in the history of journalism, simply because from now on, journalists are more respected, more immune, and more protected than before, because they stick together and they fight together and they are reaching a conclusion together.
Do you think this will have, the killing, the homicide of Jamal Khashoggi will cast any kind of, ramifications on what's known as the Arab Spring? Will this affect what's happening in the region, or it's just a domestic issue that may lead to the departure of bin Salman and that's it?
It is of direct impact on the Arab Spring. What happened to Jamal Khashoggi is actually first a result of this dark age that we've gone through because of the collapse of the Arab Spring and the counter-revolutions. It's a direct effect. Jamal would have never been killed if this current status of darkness, Middle Ages mentality took over the Arab world from 2013. He would have never been killed. This is number one. Second, he is giving a lesson to young people that still hope is possible. Still there are people willing to struggle and strive for the sake of democracy, balanced, objective, but at the same time value-centered, and they will never compromise. Jamal was a role model and will continue to be a role model for the generations to come.
Do you think, by a way or another, will the killing of Jamal Khashoggi backfire inside Saudi Arabia? Will we have one day a kind of a Saudi Spring? Is this possible?
No doubt that Jamal Khashoggi already fired inside Saudi Arabia. I think a lot of people inside the family, the royal family itself, are worried about what Mohammed bin Salman is doing, and they wish to get rid of him because he is implicating all of them. This is A. B, I think the general public in Saudi Arabia, watching this crime, knowing about the details of it, of course, they will feel angry and they will feel that something has to be done. They might not be able to do it now. They might be scared. There might be a lot of pressure on them. But this is an accumulation of pressure. One day, they will pay the price. The people who did this crime.
The King Salman recently spoke, and he didn't say anything about the killing. He also said that Mohammed bin Salman will be in the overhaul, the reform of the intelligence. He appointed him as the chief, and he's not giving up Mohammed bin Salman. The royal family, in case Mohammed bin Salman leaves, who's going to replace him?
Mohammed bin Salman right now, even if he continues to exist, which in my opinion is not necessarily going to happen, but even if he continues, who in this free world, who in the world would love to have a photo opportunity with Mohammed bin Salman after this kind of a crime? There is an issue of legitimacy, an issue of credibility, issue of morality, issue even practicality of him being able to lead his country in the future. This is why if the institution Saudi Arabia, whoever still has independent mind, a mind of respect to the regime and history of Saudi Arabia and status of Saudi Arabia in the Islamic world and internationally, will definitely think that the time has come to have someone reasonable to lead the country instead of continuing this miserable situation that we are in.
September the 11th, the genocide, what's happening now in Yemen, the war in the region didn't break this kind of bilateral relation between the United States and the Saudi royal family. Do you think the case of Jamal Khashoggi will cast any dark shadows on these relations?
Right now, Mohammed bin Salman is willing to do anything needed in order to get out of this crisis. He will end the war in Yemen, most likely, through a little bit of pressure from the Americans and here and there, and I think he will go ahead with it. He might end the siege of Qatar, because again, he would like to appear as a reasonable person. He might even release some prisoners here and there to ease the tension inside Saudi Arabia. In my opinion, he is willing and capable of doing anything right now to escape from the punishment of Jamal Khashoggi crime. Now, to what extent this will impact on his relationship with America? If the Americans continue the Donald Trump approach, I think in a way or another, he is going to become a puppet completely. Of course, he has been always an ally, but he will definitely be driven by the Donald Trump administration in the future. But whether the rest of the American institutions, the Congress and others and media, which is playing a major role in this case, will accept Mohammed Salman in the future, will he has a good ride to Washington one day, a good appearance in the Congress one day, a good visit to US one day? I'm not sure about that.
Today, let's assume, is the 1st of October, a day before Jamal Khashoggi was killed in the consulate, and you had a phone call with Jamal. What would you tell him if he tells you that I'm going to the consulate tomorrow morning?
When Jamal told us about the embassy that he visited in Washington and the consulate that he's going to visit in Istanbul, we did not understand to what extent the evil doing of this regime could reach, what level of brutality and vicious mentality that they have. I would have said to Jamal, we should abandon our good heart, naive thinking about the concept of living with these tyrants, because they are much worse than what we expect. We judge them because of our standards. They judged us because of their rotten mentality. Two different things. So the brutality was not expected. It was shocking. I'm sure Jamal was shocked when he went into that consular office, and they start attacking him. I think his shock was much more than his fear, because he never expected this to happen in his country, a country that he served decades, as you said, as part of its institutions. We did not expect it. We know how evil the Arab world has become, unfortunately, the Arab regimes have become. But we did not even think in our wildest dreams that this could happen. This is to tell you that we did not judge them correctly. And they are much worse than what we know.
So you're saying that Jamal told you that he went to the embassy in Washington, that something Khalid bin Salman, the ambassador, completely denied. He said in the CIA report that he was not in contact since the 26th of October 2017.
Jamal Khashoggi told me personally that he visited the embassy in Washington to get some papers. While he was waiting in the consulate section, someone came to him and he said to him, His Highness would like to talk to you. His Highness here is a reference to the ambassador, Khalid bin Salman, ambassador of Saudi Arabia in Washington. He said, I went with him. He took me to the office of the ambassador, and the ambassador spoke to me nicely, and he said, you are most welcome. This is your house, whatever it is. And I was to tell you that, our people in Saudi Arabia, they like you, and they would love you to come back, and they read your tweets, and they know that you are a good person, you are committed to the country.
So this Khalid bin Salman talking to Jamal
Khashoggi
face to face.
Jamal told me this story personally just after it happened, few days after it happened. So yes, he did visit Saudi Arabia and the embassy, and he did have that conversation with the ambassador. And I think he did visit it more than once, at least with the ambassador. This is a story that I personally heard about it. So Jamal was dealing with the embassy as an institution to get papers from and to, like any citizen, referring to it whenever he needs to do. And he did the same with the consulate in Istanbul.
What do you think the body of Jamal is?
I think it has, been dissolved. I don't think we are going to find most of his body. They might have taken the head out to Saudi Arabia. I would expect that, but I would never, I think by now, feel that we are going to find his body.
Mr. Wadah, thank you very much for sparing the time to talk to TRT. Thank you, sir.
You're most welcome. Thanks a lot. Thank you.